Welcome back. So, happening now in Minneapolis, the Department of Homeland Security is conducting an investigation into fraudulent Minnesota daycare and healthcare centers. This as FBI Director Patel says the Bureau is surging resources to the state, warning the $250 million scheme could be the very tip of the iceberg. Garrett Tenney has the latest on the growing investigation. Garrett?
Yeah, Lawrence, to give you a sense of how widespread this fraud might be, at least 62 child care centers in Minnesota were under investigation earlier this year before all of this blew up. This is something that has been going on for over a decade now, and it often works pretty similar to the other fraud schemes that are already being investigated in Minnesota. Daycare centers will get low-income parents to enroll their kids, give the parents some kind of kickback, and sometimes they never show up again, while the owners are charging the federal government millions of dollars a year. Independent reporter Nick Shirley put the spotlight back on this problem that's been going on for years when he tried to visit several child care centers that are under investigation, and his video went viral. Here's a small bit of that.
So this is Quality Learning Center. I meant to say Quality Learning Center.
Don't open
They
up!
said they spelt learning wrong.
We're just wondering where the children are.
And who are you?
We'd like to ask where the money's going. Look at that. Shut us down. Where are the children at? No children inside of this daycare center.
Federal agents are now on the ground in Minneapolis going door to door to some of these businesses that are suspected of fraud. Federal prosecutors say the total fraud in Minnesota could ultimately be more than $9 billion. After Shirley's video went viral, Governor Tim Walz's office defended his handling of this growing scandal, telling Fox News the governor has worked for years to crack down on fraud and asked the state legislature for more authority to take aggressive action. He has strengthened oversight. They go on to say he is now taking steps to stop it from happening, including creating a statewide fraud prevention program. But state Republican lawmakers argue that Walz has had 7 years to address this and has done almost nothing, despite whistleblowers saying they have been sounding the alarm the entire time. Just this past hour, a group of those lawmakers said they are now calling on Walz to resign, even as he's currently running for re-election. Lawrence?
Incredible that he continues to deny it. Garrett, thanks so much.
I've been telling you about this Minnesota fraud scheme. They took all this COVID money and just wasted it. Politicians knew about it. There was no real investigation. They went after the whistleblowers. It was billions and billions of dollars. Many in the Somali community and political, leaders didn't want to criticize what was going on because they didn't want to affect their community. Well, Patel is taking it a step further, saying that they have found that there's another $250 million that are a part of the fraud scheme. And he says that it's the tip of the iceberg. This is what he said in the full statement. Even before the public conversation escalated online, the FBI has surged personnel, investigative resources to Minnesota to dismantle the large-scale fraud schemes, exploiting federal programs. Fraud that steals from taxpayers and robs vulnerable children will remain a top priority for the FBI in Minnesota and nationwide. To the date, the FBI believes that this is just the tip of the very large iceberg.
Kristi Noem posting video of Homeland Security investigators on the ground in Minneapolis, saying they are, quote, conducting a massive investigation on child care and other rampant fraud. Their investigation following a viral video that now has nearly 114 million views on X, where independent journalist Nick Shirley appears to show daycares and other businesses that received millions in state funds with no kids inside. Correspondent Garrett Tenney is live with more.
Yeah, Molly, the latest example of these fraud schemes in Minnesota are child care centers where rampant fraud has seemingly been allowed to go on for years now. Quality Learning Center is just one of the child care centers that federal investigators are now looking into, and there are plenty of red flags, starting with the sign on its building that doesn't even spell learning right. Over the past 3 years, the business has been cited for more than 120 violations for all kinds of things, including for not having proper documentation for all of the kids there. Despite that, from 2019 to 2024, the business received nearly $8 million in federal tax money, according to the local ABC station. Shirley also went to other child care centers across the Twin Cities where he says there were similar red flags.
We're just wondering where the children are.
Who are you?
We'd like to ask where the money's going. Look at that. Shut us down. Where are the children at? No children inside of this daycare center.
After Shirley's videos went viral, Governor Tim Walz's office sent us this statement saying the governor has worked for years to crack down on fraud and asked the state legislature for more authority to take aggressive action. He has strengthened oversight. Walz's office also defended his handling of the widespread fraud schemes that have been happening for years by claiming he's now taking steps to stop it from happening, including creating a statewide fraud prevention program. But federal investigators are now looking into claims that for years Walz ignored whistleblowers who tried to sound the alarm on the fraud.
This guy now is scrambling to make it look like he's doing something. 2 weeks ago, he created a position with a guy to investigate fraud. 7 years too late, Timmy. It's time that we find answers to all these questions and hold everybody accountable that has ripped off Minnesota taxpayers.
Over the weekend, FBI Director Kash Patel reiterated that this is very much an ongoing investigation and that the Bureau believes the fraud that we've seen so far is just the tip of a very large iceberg. Molly?
Thank you very much, Garrett. Well, this has been an amazing story that has really been covered for a couple years, but has started exploding more in recent weeks as we saw that some of the funding that had, some of the taxpayer funding that had gone to these groups was actually being funneled to al-Shabaab in foreign countries, terrorist groups, and also this video that went viral this weekend showing that all of these places that had been getting taxpayer funds that claiming to be daycares didn't have any children inside of them. Griff, I'm wondering, is this your path to financial freedom, starting a daycare center in Minnesota?
Well, gosh, Molly, I'm certainly not going to do that because it's illegal, but boy, wouldn't it be easy. And, you know, it's interesting in Garrett's a report there, he was talking about Governor Walz is saying that he's pushing back, saying that he's for years tried to fight against fraud. Well, really? Is that the case? Because when you trace back how this all started, going back to Ilhan Omar's 2020 Meals Act to just get money out the door to school children who might miss lunches and all these other things, you see that it was a industrial scale fraud opportunity. And in this case, you know, the fact that Nick Shirley went out with a camera, I think is brilliant because there has been very little reporting from other networks on this story. And you're starting to see now, obviously, from FBI Director Kash Patel says that it's, you know, a tip of an iceberg. Well, where are they? It reminds me, Molly, of when Bill Malugin and I went down to the border years ago, started standing there with thousands coming across, and no other network had any interest in it. Well, now you're starting to see it, and there are convictions. And then originally, the only discussion you saw on other networks were people that were basically blasting it as, you know, racist or targeting. Well, guess what? 71 of 78 people charged in this case are Somali.
Yeah, well, let's look at how New York Times opinion writer Mara Gay characterized the Minnesota fraud scandal when she joined MS Now this morning.
There's also other scandals in other states, for example, the Mississippi welfare scandal. And this is not unique to politics. Americans know that. But of course, the other factor here is that because it looks like the Somali population in Minnesota, the Somali immigrant population may have been at involved in some way, those people are being scapegoated. And that community is being scapegoated in a way that certainly serves the far right.
So, Marie, do you think that this video got 114 million views on social media because people are trying to scapegoat Somalis, or what do you think is causing the interest?
I mean, I have no idea why people watch things online, but this has been a real problem in Minnesota for a long time. The first raids by police on daycare centers were in 2015. So that was a decade ago. In 2022, the FBI started getting involved more in conducting raids as well. Tim Walz has done some things to try and crack down on some of this fraud. I would also point out the Minnesota Star Tribune has written hundreds of stories about this over the past decade. It's not a network, to your point, but if you want to really dig into some of the history here, this is not a new phenomenon. I have no idea why now this video has gone viral, maybe because he went there and was asking questions and people were slamming doors in his face. But this is something Minnesota lawmakers, including, by the way, Congressman Emmer, I mean, he's sort of like, he represents Minnesota, a district, like he has no idea what's going on. It hasn't done anything over the past decade to help fix it. So this is a problem. If people have committed crimes, they should be charged. I do hate the language President Trump uses about people from Somalia when he calls them trash or garbage. I don't like that language, separate from the issue of fraud. I just don't think that that's appropriate for a president to use.
Well, I think one of the things that, Kaylee, maybe you can address this too. This video is so interesting. It's 48 minutes. I actually watched every second of it after one of my kids brought it to my attention. And it was riveting to see someone going location to location. Groups, and they were Nick Shirley and his assistant, who's not getting nearly enough credit, is this man who's just a local citizen who noticed that there were never children at any of the daycares that were posted as daycares. So he started digging into how much funding they were getting and what was going on there. And you see the difference in how the media covers stories that they love to cover. If they love to cover a story, a major network with TV cameras would, of course, be on the ground. When they don't want to cover it, they kind of soft pedal it. They might mention, okay, there's rampant fraud to the tune of billions of dollars out of Somalia, but they don't advance the story. So what do you think? Yeah, what do you think about the media coverage now and what could be done?
Well, they're not covering it because it's inconvenient for them to do so, because A, it undermines their immigration agenda, but B, I think we're going to find that a lot of this fraud actually benefited Democratic officials. I think you're going to see that in the investigation. There has already been one report that there was a state candidate out in Washington state who received donations from some of these so-called child care firms in Minnesota. That's a problem. So I do wonder how much of this money has made its way into the political coffers. And I think this story is important for one very big reason, which is that the average American who works hard, who sends their their tax money into the IRS every year, has to go through, they have to cross every T, they have to dot every I, or they're going to risk an investigation. And you have the Somali community pilfering billions of dollars, not just from state tax dollars, but from federal tax dollars, in order to run these daycare centers and make a profit off of it. And not only that, but your taxpayer dollars has also funded their ability to open the daycare centers in the first place. There's an account on X called Oilfield Rando who's looking into the grants that went to some of these NGOs that give education courses to immigrant communities on how to open these programs. Your taxpayer dollars funded that as well.
Tommy, what do you think? Like, this is happening in Minnesota, but it must be happening nationwide, right?
Oh, they're cracking the case in Ohio. I mean, can you imagine what it looks like in California? I can only imagine what it looks like in California. Listen, now, to your point, Marie, is not the time for tough talking and strongly worded letters. Now's the time for heads to roll. Governor Tim Walz, you might have done something. You certainly didn't do enough, because guess what? The Quality Learning Center is still standing. So if a month's time the Quality Learning Center is still there or is still being funded, that is a massive disappointment, not only for Governor Tim Walz, but for Republicans, for the DOJ, for oversight, for everybody involved. You're exactly right. Republicans have been far too complacent with all of this. And why? Because nobody wants to be called a name. Nobody wants to be called racist. Nobody wants to be called Islamophobic. But when you look at it and it's a certain community that's doing this because maybe in their home country this is more acceptable, you've got to look at who is causing the problem, and you've got to get to the bottom of it. And no more endless hearings of nothing for sound bites and fundraising bits for Republicans. Do something about this. The American people are frustrated. We pay taxes every year, and we've got to get to the bottom of this and end it once and for all.
Just a massive scandal.
Thanks, guys. A Fox News alert. A flood of new information is coming out about Minnesota's massive fraud scandal. Each new revelation is fueling more and more demands for answers from Democrat Governor Tim Walz and his administration. The FBI saying it's massing resources to get those answers. This is the Faulkner Focus. Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Banderas, in for Harris today. So an independent journalist is documenting some damning sites at multiple Somali-run child care centers in Minneapolis. The videos are shocking. They show misspelled signs, boarded up windows, locked doors at no children at the centers that reportedly received millions of dollars in state and federal funding. That journalist is now speaking out about his findings. Watch.
I've known about the fraud taking place for a long time. Minnesotans have been telling me for a long time about the Somali fraud that is taking place. And with his help, we were able to crack over $110 million in fraud in one day. And that's just the tip. When people say it's the tip of the iceberg, it really is, because there's billions of fraud inside the state of Minnesota right now. A kindergartner could figure out that there's fraud going on.
Walz's office pushed back against the videos, saying, quote, the governor has worked for years to crack down on fraud and asked the state legislature for more authority to take aggressive action. He has strengthened oversight, including launching investigations into these specific facilities, end quote. House Majority Whip and Minnesota Republican Tom Emmer with this.
If what they're saying is real and can be documented, and what they're saying is they told Tim Walz about the fraud when it was happening, and he not only ignored them, he retaliated against him. I'm telling you, Molly, if that's accurate and it can be proven, Tim Walz needs to be held accountable. Everybody in his administration needs to be held accountable. It's time that we find answers to all these questions and hold everybody accountable.
Congressman Chip Roy is coming up, but first, Garrett Tenney has more on this mess. Hi, Garrett.
Hey, Julie. One of the most surprising things about this new alleged fraud in the child care space in Minneapolis is that it really isn't new at all. There have been reports about this very thing happening since even before Tim Walz took office, and it appears that it has largely been allowed to continue without much interruption. One example of a child care business that is now under the microscope is Quality Learning Center, or Leering Center, as the sign says. The business is licensed for 99 children, from infants to toddlers, but the business hours are from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Over the past 3 years, it has been cited for more than 120 violations for all kinds of things, including for not having proper documentation for all of the kids there. Despite that, the local ABC station reported back in January that the business has still been able to receive nearly $8 million in federal tax money since 2019. We've also confirmed that the owners took out more than $200,000 in PPP loans during the pandemic that were completely forgiven. Nick Shirley says there were similar red flags at some of the other child care centers that he tried to visit in the Twin Cities.
It's so obvious. If you're living in Minnesota, you have to raise your eyebrows and think, what's going on? Literally, if you drive around Minnesota, around Minneapolis, you'll see daycare centers, autism centers. You will then see transportation companies that have snow piled up as if they haven't moved in months.
After Shirley's videos went viral, FBI Director Kash Patel posted that the Bureau is all over this, saying fraud that steals from taxpayers and robs vulnerable children will remain a top FBI priority in Minnesota and nationwide. The FBI believes this is just the tip of a very large iceberg. We will continue to follow the money and protect children, and this investigation very much remains ongoing. While Governor Tim Walz and other state officials are now claiming that they are taking steps to investigate and to keep this from happening again, remember, these claims of fraud in child care centers are not new. In fact, all the way back in 2018, as Walz was making his first run for governor, sources in the Somali community told our local station, KMSP, that it was an open secret that starting a daycare center and billing the federal government for it was like getting a license to make money. Julie?
Garrett Tenney, thank you. Republican Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, member of the Judiciary Budget and Rules Committees, joins me now. Thank you so much for talking to us. All right, so let's just talk about Walz and his credibility here when he says that he didn't know that any of this was going on when it's such a massive fraud scandal. How could he not know?
Yeah, Julie, great to be with you. I hope you had a Merry Christmas. And,
you too.
You know, it defies all logic and reason to believe that Governor Walz was ignorant of what was happening in Minnesota. Let's be clear. He was campaigning on it last year with respect to the campaign with Vice President Harris in her run for the presidency. He literally was talking about it. Thank God that President Trump won that election. Thank God that we do not have a Harris-Walz presidency, because they would be encouraging this to continue, whereas this president is rooting out the fraud, securing the border, stopping the flow of people into our country. But this is what happens when you have massive welfare programs that are funding people that are coming into our country, whether it's illegally or, frankly, through legal channels that are being abused by the radical left and the Marxists who want this to occur. The Somali community knew full well what they were doing. It's a part of an enterprise-wide effort that's global, tied to the United Nations, tied to world organizations, NGOs, our own taxpayer dollars that are being used against us while we import people to be put on the welfare state, to be put on Medicaid, and to take taxpayer money. It's fraud that has to be stopped, and people need to be removed, deported, denaturalized, and sent back to Somalia.
I just want to know, how are they going to recoup that money? I mean, is that what Walz is now going to concentrate on? Because he says that investigations are ongoing in these centers, but where's the money? And why should taxpayers have to foot the bill? Who's going to end up paying the government back? Or is it going to be the responsibility of Congress, of taxpayers?
Well, importantly, I'm really proud that we've at least put some fraud protection in the big, beautiful bill, working with President Trump and what we did with the work requirements and Medicaid, because we knew that there was ripe for abuse. But we've got to go a lot farther at the federal level, and we've got to hold states accountable. Right now, they know what they're doing, and they're trying to take this money. And by the way, this is the tip of the iceberg. Let's go look at what Gavin Newsom in California, what they're doing with the billions of dollars. And we know there is massive Medicaid fraud going on in California. We've got to stop that at the federal level and at the state level. And look, one of the reasons I'm leaving Congress to run for Attorney General, Medicaid fraud is a central element of being Attorney General of a state. Keith Ellison was neck deep in all of this. Keith Ellison is friendly with CARE, friendly with groups that are affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood. All of this stuff is connected. And if we don't recognize that, then we're not going to win this battle, because it's a purposeful effort to exploit our laws to allow people to come to this country, try to Islamify our country, and use the welfare state to do it.
Critics are also asking why Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's husband reportedly purged key officer official details from his $25 million venture capital firm's website. Now, this move comes amid growing questions about the couple's wealth and possible connection to the welfare fraud. According to her latest financial disclosure in May, the couple's net worth surged 3,500% in just 1 year. It estimates now putting it anywhere from $6 million to $30 million. Their net worth went up 3,500%. How do you explain that? And then talk about the scrubbing on the website. That doesn't look good. What's Walz doing about that? Is he looking into this?
Well, certainly not. I mean, he's certainly supportive of whatever they're doing. And this is one of the other things that we need to address, is the extent to which members of Congress find themselves getting wealthy while they're in Congress. In this case, it appears by being completely in bed with all of the fraudulent activity that's going on in Minnesota. Of course, we should investigate this. Of course, should we look into what they're scrubbing from their website. I think we've got to explore this as far as we can, including potentially looking into denaturalizing and removing Ilhan Omar if she's violated our laws. And by the way, we should also ban stock trading among members of Congress, since we're talking about the wealth of Congress, and I have a bill to do that, and I hope we will do that next year. Mike Johnson, the Speaker, is working with us to do that. We have got to stop all of this flow of dollars that is corrupting our system, empower the American people to do what they do best, and we've got to pause immigration. I introduced a bill to pause immigration because we've got to stop this massive abuse of our system, using H-1Bs, using diversity visas. President Trump is exactly right to have frozen the diversity visas, to have stopped that, to freeze the flow from countries of concern. Remember that in 1920, when we had a high percentage of people that were foreign-born, we froze immigration for 40 years. And our country vanquished, the Nazis in Germany, freed the world. We did great things in those 40 years. We can do it again. That's why I introduced legislation to pause immigration. The president's right to do that, and I'm supporting him in that effort.
Okay, meantime, the Trump administration is working to highlight its achievements this year ahead of next year's midterm elections. And commentator Scott Jennings says that one victory is bigger than the rest. What is it? Let's watch.
I think on the immigration piece, it's been his biggest success this year. It's the biggest promise fulfilled. We've had 2.5 million people deported. A significant number of them were self-deported. They used the government's app or just decided to leave the country altogether. I know the left has treated this as some big controversy, but I don't know what's controversial about the president just simply enforcing the laws that are on the books.
And the numbers back that up. The Department of Homeland Security says that more than 2.5 million illegal immigrants have left the U.S. since Trump took office, nearly 2 million of those electing to self-deport. And the White House also says that 0 illegal immigrants have been released into the United States for 7 straight months. The Democrats call that horrible. What say you?
Well, I do think this is the greatest achievement of the presidency. They've dropped down the flow at the border to 0. We feel it in Texas. We're a much safer and stronger country as a result. The president is right. Tom Homan, Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, all of the great work of ICE and Border Patrol, they're standing behind them. ICE is removing people that need to be removed. But let's add to that this next year. Let's stop the abuse of our legal immigration system. Let's permanently make reforms so that you can't have H-1Bs and diversity visas that are messing up our country by importing people who are using our welfare system, which you opened this segment with. The president should be congratulated, his entire team, for what they're doing. But we got to finish the job, and Congress needs to codify what the president has been doing so you can't have a future Biden and Mayorkas that destroys the system. Let's pause immigration. Let's reform the system. Let's make permanent changes to back up what the president's done. And by the way, one underreported piece, the SUE Act, which we included in the Lake and Riley Act last January, which was a bill that I authored with Dan Bishop, that was included, which allows states to sue the federal government if they fail to secure the border in the future, so that we can stop a future Biden-Mayorkas administration from doing that. We're doing a lot of great things, but Congress needs to back the president up in 2026.
Congressman Chip Roy, thank you, and have a happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Julie. God bless.
Well, there's fresh outrage over allegations of widespread fraud of taxpayer dollars in the state of Minnesota. A viral video appears to expose that alleged fraud at several Somali-operated child care centers in Minneapolis. And the independent journalist who published that video, which now has over 100 million views, tells Fox News the scam is extensive.
I've known about the fraud taking place for a long time. Minnesotans have been telling me for a long time about the Somali fraud that is taking place. And that's just the tip. When people say it's the tip of the iceberg, it really is, because there's billions of fraud inside the state of Minnesota right now.
And Garrett Tenney is covering this story from our Midwest Bureau. Garrett, good morning to you.
Yeah, Bill, good morning. This is just the latest example of the kind of widespread fraud that whistleblowers say has been taking place in Minnesota for years. And elected officials from towns around the state all the way to Capitol Hill are demanding investigations now into child care centers like this one. Quality Learning Center in Minneapolis. You can see this child care center that has received millions of dollars in federal tax money over the past 6 years can't even spell learning right on its sign. And since May 22, this business has been investigated at least 13 times for more than 50 different violations by the Department of Human Services in Minnesota. The business is licensed for 99 kids, but when independent reporter Nick Shirley went by this month, the place appeared completely empty.
There's no one here right now. It's midday on a weekday. And if you were to try to go inside, it's completely closed. There's no windows, no nothing. And like I said, they literally spelt the word wrong on their sign. This is open and blatant fraud taking place here inside of Minnesota.
Shirley went to multiple child care centers and said he found similar setups where businesses that have received piles of taxpayer dollars were either closed or he couldn't see any children present. In response to that video that's now gone viral, Vice President J.D. Vance posted on X, "What's happening in Minnesota is a microcosm of the immigration fraud in our system. Politicians like it because they get power. Welfare cheats like it because they get rich. But it's a zero-sum game, and they are stealing both money and political power from Minnesotans." Senator Ron Johnson says this is now going to be a primary focus for congressional investigators.
These agency heads who funnel the federal money to the state agencies, they have to demand that the state agencies are transparent. And unfortunately, particularly in Democrat-controlled states, they're not. They're refusing to turn over those records. I've got subpoena power. I will use that subpoena power to obtain these records because we have to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is under fire for all of this happening under his watch, but he says he's now taking steps to investigate this fraud further. He claims it's something they've already been looking into and that they are now setting up guardrails to keep it from happening again. Bill?
And Nick Shirley's video at 110 million views as of this morning. Viral is an understatement there. Safe to say plenty of public interest in this. Garrett Tenney live in Chicago for us this morning. Garrett, thank you. Molly?
Thank you, Bill. Minnesota Republican Congressman Tom Emmer is the House Majority Whip, and here to comment on all of this. An incredible story here breaking. As Bill noted, this has gone viral. Nick Shirley's reporting. He got out there and he did, the old-fashioned legwork. He walked the walk, he asked questions, and he revealed some fascinating stuff. And as many people have said, potentially the tip of the iceberg here. I want to get your thoughts on his reporting and what's been exposed here.
Well, great to be with you, Molly. I mean, look, this young journalist, Nick Shirley, goes out there and finds more evidence of fraud in one day than Tim Walz and our Attorney General Keith Ellison have found in 7 years. Why did he find it? Because he looked for it, Molly. While Tim Walz and Keith Ellison have been looking the other way, billions of dollars have been stolen from Minnesota taxpayers. You've got the child care centers that he showed you. There's 80 autism centers that are under investigation. There was a housing stabilization program that was created in 2020. They estimated it was going to run about $2 million a year. Molly, they shut it down in October because it was rife with fraud, and they'd already sucked out over $160 million. The U.S. Attorney's Office here in Minnesota estimates this fraud could actually reach $9 billion before the investigation is all over. And we've got two major issues going on in addition to just the fraud. One, millions of dollars of this fraud has been shipped back to Somalia to a known terrorist group, al-Shabaab. And two, we've got all kinds of whistleblowers now that are coming forward. And if what they are saying is real and can be documented, and what they're saying is they told Tim Walz about the fraud when it was happening. And he not only ignored them, he retaliated against him. I'm telling you, Molly, if that's accurate and it can be proven, Tim Walz needs to be held accountable. Everybody in his administration needs to be held accountable. This guy now is scrambling to make it look like he's doing something. 2 weeks ago, he created a position with a guy to investigate fraud. 7 years too late, Timmy. It's time that we find answers to all these questions and hold everybody accountable that has ripped off Minnesota taxpayers and, frankly, supported terrorists in a foreign country.
A lot of interesting points there. The House Oversight Committee as well looking into this and asking a lot of questions about what's going on in Minnesota. I want to get a little look ahead, at 2026, some of the difficult challenges that Congress is facing, particularly when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and the expiring subsidies. I want to get your take on this. This is Representative Swalwell, Congressman on the Democratic side, of course, and get your reaction. Take a listen.
The majority of the House Representatives wants to put these subsidies in place so that Americans can pay less for health care. So it's now on the Speaker, when we reconvene in just a couple days, whether he will put this up for a vote.
Yeah, now there are millions of people that supposedly depend on these subsidies. Your thoughts on where this is heading and what Republicans will be doing?
Well, these comments are indicative. They're what the Democrats are trying to do. It's very disingenuous, Molly. These are enhanced premium tax credits. Let's make it clear to your viewers that these are paid directly to health insurance companies, not to the people that need the health insurance, which is the other thing that's important here. These enhanced premium tax credits were created by Democrats during the pandemic under unusual circumstances to expire on December 31st of this year. They only impact 21 million people in this country, while 300 million people are seeing their health insurance premiums run out of control to the extent that they can't afford it. These guys are talking about 21 million people. Eric Swalwell and Democrats do not want to fix this problem. They want it as a political issue. I applaud Donald Trump, who is going after the problem. He is going after drug prices, and now he's calling health insurance executives in front of him to talk about why it is over the last 15 years when Democrats and their co-conspirators, the health insurance industry, created the Unaffordable Care Act. Why is it over the last 15 years that health insurers have been making billions of dollars while Americans have less and less access to the great health care that this country has to offer? That's the real problem, and Donald Trump and Republicans are addressing it.
Yeah, and we shall see how those reforms go. It's going to be a fascinating 2026. Sir, Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. Congressman Tom Emmer.
Same, Molly.
Welcome back, everyone. Governor Tim Walz still defending and deflecting blame over the growing fraud scandal in his state of Minnesota. This as the FBI revealing they're on the case. Director Kash Patel confirming, quote, the FBI dismantled a $250 million fraud scheme that stole federal food aid meant for vulnerable children during COVID. That investigation exposed sham vendors, shell companies, and large-scale money laundering. The case led to 78 indictments and 57 convictions. The FBI believes this is just the tip of a very large iceberg, end quote. Well, Minnesota native and Alpha News journalist Liz Collin has been covering this scandal from day one. She joins us now. Good morning to you. All right, is this really blowing up and ballooning in your state the way that it is nationally? Because right now, all eyes on Minnesota.
Yeah, good morning, Guy. After this viral YouTube video, I think it's frustrating for many of us to admit here, but this has been going on for years and basically out in the open. If you saw that video in Minnesota, we have stories dating back nearly a decade now. Fake daycares, millions of dollars in cash and carry-on luggage flying out of our airport by Somali men each week. The question, though, now I think with the glare of the national spotlight, will it actually stop? I wanted to highlight just a recent story we did after some investigation over at Alpha News. I think it highlights how deep this goes. But we looked into the Minneapolis Public School District and asked why it hired all of these transportation companies after we received reports of vans sitting in parking lots or having no riders in them at all when people would see them out on the road, literally no passengers ever. And we found one particular company paid millions of dollars by the school district. And here's the kicker. A new state law took effect in 2023 guaranteeing school districts 100% reimbursement for transportation costs for homeless and highly mobile students. So what do we see? We see that number of homeless students skyrocket in the Minneapolis school district by 40% the next year. But that's often what we're seeing is you uncover this legislation that seems to be tied in so many cases to this fraud, Guy.
Yeah, no, it seems like you just pull on one string and it leads to some giant waste or stealing of taxpayer dollars. And it's all across the state through all these programs. Now, the House Majority Whip nationally for the Republican Party is Tom Emmer of Minnesota. Here's what he just had to say.
They've got a whole bunch of pending people that could be indicted. And what does Tim Walz do? He puts a post out on his Twitter that says, Happy Catter Day. With a picture of a cat. Whistleblowers are coming forward, and if they are real, Mike, and if what they're saying can be documented, and what they're saying is they told Tim Walz, they told Keith Ellison about the fraud when it was happening, and they not only didn't do anything, they retaliated against them. Mike, if that's true, if that can be documented, these guys need to be prosecuted.
Yeah, so that's a very explosive element to this whole story. And it's kind of fascinating to see how Governor Walz is responding to all of it. He sort of says over here, oh, we're taking it very seriously. We're all over it, which they clearly haven't been for years. But don't worry, we got this. Also, it's not as bad as you think. Also, the Republicans are only doing this for political reasons. Also, this might be racist. It's kind of all over the place, isn't it?
Absolutely. There is just mounting frustration, though, I can tell you, just among taxpayers in Minnesota as they're seeing more and more of this. We actually went out recently to check out a new round of sites, autism centers, adult daycares, programs rife with fraud. And I'll be honest, so much of this just seems fake. They have fake Google reviews, fake stock photos on their websites. In many cases, we found phone numbers don't work on their websites. And you're right, how Governor Walz is acting seems pretty telling as well. He seems to be making some maneuvers now as he runs for re-election for a third term in Minnesota. But I can tell you there is a petition that's been going around for just the last couple of weeks. Tens of thousands of people have now signed it, demanding that he resign in the wake of this fraud. So clearly a story where there is more to come. And again, mounting frustration, I think, among the taxpayers here in Minnesota.
Yeah, I can imagine, because people work hard for their money. It's being stolen hand over fist by these criminals. And the party in charge of your state has at least turned a blind eye, if not worse, to all of it. And we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg per the FBI. Liz Collin, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Guy.
7:33 on the
Exactly. Well, there's another thorny issue as well back here at home in the United States. We've been telling you about this Minnesota fraud scheme. They took all this COVID money and just wasted it. Politicians knew about it. There was no real investigation. They went after the whistleblowers. It was billions and billions of dollars. Many in the Somali community and political, leaders didn't want to criticize what was going on because they didn't want to affect their community. Well, Patel is taking it a step further. Sandra, they have found that there's another $250 million that are a part of the fraud scheme. And he says that it's the tip of the iceberg. This is what he said in the full statement. Even before the public conversation escalated online, the FBI has surged personnel, investigative resources to Minnesota to dismantle the large-scale fraud schemes, exploiting federal programs. Fraud that steals from taxpayers and robs vulnerable children will remain a top priority for the FBI in Minnesota and nationwide. To the date, the FBI believes that this is just the tip of the very large iceberg. Reaction to that?
Well, I'm still hung up on the fact that you had the U.S. Assistant Attorney John Thompson last month talk about these two individuals who had heard that Minnesota's Housing Stabilization Services Program was such easy money that they traveled to Minnesota, enrolled their companies in the program, returned to Philly, and then submitted the fraudulent claims from Philadelphia. So it was so easy that it encouraged this fraud tourism. He said that there are possibly 14 high-risk Medicaid programs that are being audited, and up to half of that amount of money, so $9 billion we're talking about here, could potentially have been fraudulent. So, so Cash Patel and all these guys, they've got a lot of work cut out for them because, I think this is going to be huge.
Oh, it already is, and it's going to get bigger, I think that's clear. And the point that you just made, Lisa, I think is such a key one because it was so bad in Minnesota that it became this tourist attraction, basically. Hey, if you want to come steal from taxpayers, come to Minnesota because it's very easy to do it there. And the question is, will taxpayers in that state look at all this and say this is unacceptable? Because it's not just waste, fraud, and abuse. It's all of that. It is robbing people. People work very hard for their money. They give it to the government in a place like Minnesota because they say, oh, we're nice and we're empathetic and we want to help people. If that money is being stolen to the tune of billions, that is money that people have worked so hard for, given to the government, confiscated by the government, and for what? To enrich a bunch of thieves? Many of whom are not from the United States in the first place. It's outrageous.
That's the main point. Governor Tim Walz, who's been under the microscope because of this, he released this statement. He said, the governor has worked for years to crack down on fraud. He has strengthened oversight, including launching investigations into the specific facilities, one of which was already closed. He has hired an outside firm to audit payments, shut down the Housing Stabilization Services Program, announced a new statewide program, integrity director, and supported criminal prosecution. But he went after the whistleblowers.
I know.
That's the problem. The people that were screaming about this, they went after, and this guy was almost the vice president of the United States. The media was tipped off about this story. There was no coverage of this during the presidential race.
I know, he's such a liar. Also, I mean, his state, Minnesota, basically turned into like the Disney World of fraud. To your point of attracting this tourism as well. I also had interviewed former prosecutor Joe Tarab, who worked on the Feeding Our Future case. And he said that this was so easy to do, he could have done it on his computer in 5 minutes if he had absolutely no conscience. That's how easy this was to do. And I'll just remind everyone, remember during the big, beautiful bill, and Democrats were just absolutely refusing any sort of changes to Medicaid.
Right.
And Republicans...
They call it a cut.
Yeah, Republicans were trying to make sure that Medicaid and welfare went into the hands of people who need it. Not like what's happening in Minnesota, people who need it. And they also try to cut down on illegal aliens being able to obtain some of these welfare programs. And what did Democrats do? They lost their minds.
That's right.
Well, they call it cut, cut, cut. No, it's just reform to try to make sure like this type of thing doesn't happen on a vast scale. And unfortunately, it is happening. It's not just Minnesota, believe me. It's a lot of places. And now you've got, young citizen journalists going door to door in Minnesota to these so-called child care centers saying, hello, are there any children here at all? Can we see one child? And the answer over and over again, there's the video right there, Nick Shirley. And he did yeoman's work here, asking very basic questions. And my question in response to this video, you can see it on X, it's a long expose. If there are any children, they are nowhere to be seen. And if this guy can do this kind of work, where are the state investigators? Where is the local media in Minneapolis or in the state of Minnesota? And it's such a bad look. And for the governor to say, oh, well, we're very strongly looking into this, and I'm going to have an outside auditor. We already know that billions have been stolen, and all he can do is downplay, 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 and occasionally race bait as well. It's all he's got.
Let's bring in Ari Fleischer, Fox News contributor and former White House press secretary. Ari, there's just so much to chew on there, and I want to take us first back to Florida because you have this Democrat representative, Sherfless McCormick, who's under investigation for fraud, and on her Christmas card, in the one photo, you see it right there on her hand, she's got a ring, but then people online pointed out that in the next image, it's airbrushed out, or at least that's the claim. I mean, at this point, this could have been a family heirloom, but if you're airbrushing out a diamond ring while you're facing fraud allegations, I mean, come on.
And one journalistic account said that ring is worth $109,000.
Wow.
Who owns a $109,000 ring, and especially a member of Congress? So, you know, I guess she's hoping she can airbrush it out and trick a jury or trick a judge, but her future lies in a courtroom. And she is accused of embezzling more than $5 million as a sitting congresswoman from COVID funds. I mean, this is the type of corruption the American people makes them sick of everybody in Washington.
Well, corruption doesn't seem to be top of mind in Minnesota, where you have the Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan, running for Senate, deciding to wear a hijab performatively, it appears, to sort of speak in solidarity to the Somalian community. That's a choice, certainly a choice, when you're staring down potentially $9 billion in taxpayer funds that were stolen from the hardworking people in your community. Is the belief that people care more about showing up in ideological ways than, I guess, making sure your tax dollars are spent on actual learning centers?
Right. I think you could put an even more finer point on it. The question for Democrats in Minnesota is, what's more important, winning the votes of a key Somali constituency or protecting $9 billion that belongs to all taxpayers? And it appears that for Governor Walz, for the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, for the Lieutenant Governor, their choice is to stand with the Somali community. Now, not everybody in the Somali community committed a crime. Not everybody is guilty of fraud. But you would think that their heart, their energy, the aggressiveness with which they react to this would be on the side of the taxpayers to fight fraud. And by the way, it's not going to be just in Minnesota where we find this. These types of scandals exist everywhere where the government gives out free money. Free money, subsidized Obamacare. You take a look at everywhere where the federal government puts its hand into the cookie jar to give money from one group to another, and that cookie jar is full of fraud. It's inevitable. And so it's not just Minnesota's Somali community. You're going to find this throughout America on almost every welfare program you can think of. It's just particularly bad in Minnesota, and Minnesota politicians are particularly dependent on the Somali community to get elected.
It's really stunning because you see that 42-minute long piece by Nick Shirley sort of unearthing the tip of the iceberg, and it's unfathomable to think that this was going on and it didn't trip a single alarm anywhere. And, $9 billion, it makes you wonder, at some level, were people aware of this and letting it happen?
Mm-hmm. You have to think that was a part of it. You have to think that the governor knew, the attorney general knew, but because it was the key political community that supports them, the Somali community, they had to look the other way. And that's where corruption comes in. This is really where you need to take a look at the governor and the attorney general. If there's any evidence that they knew, looked the other way, swept it under the rug, I hope there's a mechanism in Minnesota to remove them from office. Now, of course, Walz is running for re-election. That will probably be the mechanism that he'll face. But what brilliant journalism. Just to go to the places that were mentioned with a camera and say, show me the children.
Right.
It reminds me of a reporter from NBC News 30 years ago who did something during a hurricane where people were looting, and he put the camera on them and said, why are you looting? And blame the individuals who committed the crime, not society. That's what you have to do.
Ari, we're almost out of time, but can you just put a bow on this for us? Taken together, all of these responses to these situations that Democrats have been making, that we've been discussing here, what does this mean for the midterms and maybe for 2028? Because just a few short months ago, the Democrats as a party were sort of soul-searching after getting crushed in the 2024 election, looking to be, about more than hating Trump and, something that actually people can relate to. It seems like they have moved off that message pretty fast.
I think it's vital for Republicans to be the party that is seen as protecting taxpayers. They'll fight for the taxpayers. That's why this issue about extending the Obamacare subsidies is so pernicious, because it, too, is a ripoff of the taxpayers. And the subsidies, there's going to be abuse. There already is. It's a reminder to Republicans to stand up for the taxpayer and not fall for the mainstream media's lines and rhetoric about how everybody needs this vital spending. It's not the way the real world works.
Okay. We will continue to watch that. Ari Fleischer, always great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.